I'm Ana Carcedo. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to the Soybean Council for sponsoring this event. So, I'm actually not going to talk much about emergence. That's the title from the presentation. But I'm going to talk much more about plant population. So I've been talking a little bit about this in other events all around the area. So I'm going to highlight some of the concepts that I already mentioned in case that you were in the best of the best. You heard some of these comments, but I'm going to dig more into the plant population section of this. Before that, I just thought it will be funny if and interesting if we just test a little bit your knowledge on how to identify symptoms for soybeans. So this is not related at all with the topic of the presentation. So, Victor, can you just, yes, launch the first? So the question is, what do you see in the picture? So I would love if you can just answer this poll. And just to just for you to know, there is no, it's anonymous, so you don't have to be ashamed if you don't answer. So what I'm seeing here is that most people say, okay, I'm seeing IDC in this, and sadly, no, it's not IDC. Something, yeah, no, I did. Something that I like to say is like, okay, if you have this situation in the field, probably the first thing that you should think is, okay, in which moment of the season we are. We are late in the season. You can see that because of the phenology. So IDC usually will show up more early in the season than later because it's really related to the size of the roots. And later in the season, roots are bigger, so usually you have less symptoms of IDC. So that's the first key that you should think when they say, okay, this might not be IDC. The second thing you should do in this situation is pull some roots. If you have pulled some roots, you will see a situation like this. And when you see these little things that they're way smaller than the regular nodules, just to clarify that they're really, really small, then you have kind of an idea that you have a soybean cyst nematode problem. Saying that, we are going to move to the second. Victor, if you want to launch the poll. Okay, this is the second picture. And again, like it's what do you see in this picture? So it could be phosphorus deficiency, sulfur deficiency, or potassium deficiency. Okay, so I'm going to just wait a little bit and things that you should start thinking when you see this. Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. So things that you have to question yourself when you are seeing something that looks like it's going to be a nutrient deficiency. Something that's really important to check is in which leaves you are seeing the symptoms. So if you see this sclerosis, that it's coming all in the border of the leaves and it starts in the all leaves, so the ones that we have in the bottom, you're probably having a potassium situation, deficiency. And saying that, I want to highlight this because we have started to see potassium deficiency in our soybean fields all across the central part of North Dakota and a little bit towards the east as well. Okay, so it's something that you might see in the field, and that's the only reason why I wanted to highlight this. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this just for you to know like which are the soil fertility decisions that you might have to do in soybeans. When we're talking about phosphorus, that I did not show the deficiency, we are talking about if you have 7 ppm of phosphorus in your soil, you might start considering, okay, I need to fertilize. When we are talking about potassium, that's the one that we were seeing the symptoms. Then when we talk about potassium, it's a little bit tricky because it depends on which kind of clay you have. So you see this map of North Dakota here. What you can see is that you have darker areas and white areas. So if you are in the white area, you can use the lower threshold, but if you are in the darker area, you have to use the higher threshold. So for the higher threshold, so if you have 200 ppm of potassium, you're good to go. You should start considering, to fertilize. If you are in the other, you have to start considering fertilizing when you are in 150. Saying that, we are going to keep moving forward with this, and this is as we are talking about fertility, and I'm actually mentioning all these things because of the market. So I know that you guys are starting to make, or maybe you already made a lot of decisions that you are going to take for this growing season. And when I see the market and when I see the cost of all the inputs, I'm a little bit scared. So I want you to be as defensive as possible when we are talking about inputs in soybeans. So when you're thinking how much fertilizer you are going to put, when you're thinking, okay, maybe I will try a new product just to try to bump my yields, probably this is not the year for that. And that's why I'm going through all these little details. So saying that, you might have or not had IDC problems in your area. I know that this year the Soybean Council is funding some research that's to just update a little bit the IDC management guidelines, and we are going to do it with Leo. So he has a field in animals that has IDC problems. That's the only reason why I put this slide here. So when we are talking about IDC, there is several ways that you can manage it. And something that Jay Goose did a long time ago, he tried 3 different varieties, one that was resistant, other that was intermediate, and other that was susceptible. And he just treated with soil green, or that's iron chelates, or didn't treat it. So you can see here the difference, okay? When you applied iron chelates, it's these points that say with iron chelates, of course you have a bump in the yield. You see that these arrows are always going up. But the thing is that when you're working with a resistant variety, this bump in the yield is way lower than the one that you have when you're working with a susceptible variety. And something that I really want to highlight on this is that a susceptible variety is never going to behave as a resistant variety when in terms of IDC. And we are talking here, we are just comparing yield. So it's like really the final result of your productive system. Saying that, soy green is so expensive. So I think you need 3 gallons per acre. And we are talking about that. Last time I checked, probably is now a little bit higher. It's $25 per acre, more or less. When we're talking about these kind of decisions, probably this is the year that probably you should move to choosing the variety that has a better behavior when we're talking about dealing with IDC compared to use products, especially this year that the numbers are really tight. So, and now we have the last, I promise this is the last poll. It's a really straight question. It's like, oh, what do you see? And it's not a tricky question. I'm going to say it's not a tricky question. I hope you get it right. Yeah, for sure. And like I'm seeing the numbers again, and yes, for sure it's crusting. This is what we are seeing is a really clear effect of crusting. And I'm actually bringing this picture because it's something. This picture is from North Dakota, actually. It's from one of my field trials this year, so not a happy picture for me. But saying that, we had a lot of situations that I will say a lot of problems with emergence this year all across the North Dakota. So we had crusting but we also had flooding, and also we had a frost problem early in the season. I'm not going to really dig into each one of these. just for you to know, if you have flooding problems, that's the first picture, of course. If you have flooding problems, something that you should do is check the nodulation after when you're evaluating the problems, because when you don't have oxygen, the rhizobia bacteria that's in the field, that's what you inoculate, usually dies, or is not at the top of their efficiency to infect the roots. So you might have nodulation problems, and we really relied on nodulation to attain our final yields. So 50% of the nitrogen that the soybean use actually comes from the nodules. So not having that is like saying that you cut the amount of nutrient that your plant has by half. So it's a lot. So you have flooding problems, that's something that you should evaluate. When we're talking about crusting, something I like to highlight, and you might like it or not, it's that sometimes in a lot of areas of North Dakota, we have heavy soils, and that combined with tillage, it's going to generate these problems in years like last year that we have heavy rains early in the season. So if you don't have any residue on the top of the soil, you don't have anything. You don't have anything to protect your soils early in the season from all the impacts of the raindrops. And that basically destroys the top layer of your soil and generates this crossing, that really heavy layer, hard for the seedlings to surface. So basically what's happened is that those seedlings, they don't have energy enough just to break that tough layer. So it is a problem. And then the last picture I want to talk about, and I'm just mentioning this because it's all things that happened this year. When we're talking about frost, there is not much that you can do to prevent that. Just be really aware when you are planting. Try to check the forecast. There is not much that you can do, but when you are assessing the damage of the frost, first of all, I will suggest don't go as soon as it happened. Try to wait at least 1 week, because it's going to look awful. It's going to look like that. But plants actually have a lot of resiliency. And even though as soon as you have the problem, it might look awful, 1 week after you're actually going to be able to see which plants actually survive. So, and then if there is some kind of damage from the growing point, you are going to see morphological changes on your plants. They are going to start sprouting. You are going to have branches in different places, and it's not going to be that main stem that you usually like, but that plant is going to survive. So assessing which seedlings are actually dead and which seedlings are actually going to survive, it's something that it's really important. So how all this unevenness actually affected my soybean yields. So we are going to talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to say, there is this misconception that says that soybean plants needs to be completely uniform in the emergence and in the spacing. They have to look like a wall and perfect. And actually, this is not true. Soybeans are really, really plastic on their morphology. They will branch and they will cover spaces. But we are going to dig a little bit into this. And I'm going to show this. That's just a diagram from my research that was done way, way back. What we did here is that we tested 4 treatments, right? We have this one here, the letter A, that's perfectly uniform. Then we have V, that we have spatial disuniformity. So we have gaps. We went after the plants emerge, and we generate those gaps. We went and take plants to make them not look nice. Then we have the option C, that is only having temporal disuniformity. What we did here was actually putting seeds 1 week after we planted. So to generate that disuniformity, it was really intentional. As you can see, we have a perfect spatial distribution. So plants are coming in perfect gaps, perfectly distributed, but they are coming in different timings because we went and plant the other plants 1 week after. And then the last option is the worst case scenario, is when you don't have temporal uniformity and you don't have spatial uniformity. So saying that, we generate those gaps like taking plants, and we also put these seeds 1 week after. So to really generate like the worst case scenario. And now I'm going to put another poll, and I promise this is truly the last one, is what do you think? Which is the worst? To have these gaps, these spatial gaps, or having plants coming in different moments? And don't be shy, again, this is anonymous, so like nobody is going to be able to see if you get it right, if you get it wrong. So don't be shy and just answer whatever you feel. Oh, guys, you're being so shy. Well, no worries. So I'm going to end the poll. And no worries, nobody wanted to answer. When we are talking about this uniformity, actually, gaps didn't matter. We know soybeans branch and they cover these spaces. Actually, we have no significant difference. We did not find yield differences when we have these big gaps and when we did not have these big gaps. But when we're talking about temporal disuniformity, plants coming in different timings, then this actually was significant. We did have yield penalties because of these plants coming in different moments. And that was up to 8% of the yield was lost because it came in different moments. Okay? And this is an experimental setting. So we have like weed control, disease control, everything was perfect. The only thing that changed between these treatments was when the plants were emerging. We tested these with different maturity groups, and of course, shorter maturity groups were more affected because they have less time to compensate. And then this is super interesting for me. We tested this in different plant populations. So it didn't matter that we put more plants. We still have that yield penalty when some seedlings were delayed. So this is important. It doesn't matter that you put more plants. If you have that temporal differences, you still are going to have that yield penalty. And I'm going to explain really briefly now why that's happening. So in this side, we have a plant that emerged early and it has a large leaf area. It grows a lot, and also it put a lot of pods and seeds. So this will be like the regular situation. In this other side, we have the contrasting thing. That is, this seedling came a little bit later. And something that's really interesting is that if you compare like the reproductive stage, R1, and you go to the field, you are not going to see high differences. Those plants are going to look the same. Like you're going to go there and you are going to say, oh, like, I didn't have troubles during the emergence. Like everything looks fine. The thing is that if you go to the last part of the graph where you have the reproductive stage, what you can see is that even though these plants have the same height, these plants have way less number of pods. So what is happening, and we always use fancy words for this, we say it has a reduced reproductive efficiency. So it generates less number of pods per unit of biomass. So we have way less number of pods. That's actually what we care. So I'm saying this because you might see problems in the emergence. In the middle of the season, it says, oh, this looks fine. These soybeans are amazing. They're magic. There's no any kind of problem. But then when you go and harvest, you might see that you did not get the yields that you were expecting. And this is the reason why. Saying that, what is happening here is that I like to say that plants are bullies, and if they see a plant that's just next to them that is smaller, they're going to try to cover it. They are going to compete for the nutrients and all the resources around them. They are going to yeah, they're going to compete with them. So saying that, that's basically what's happening in this situation, is that when you have these temporal differences in the emergence, what is happening is that bigger plants are covering and competing with the smaller plants. So I'm going to go really briefly through this, and this is actually something that you probably know, but when you are assessing, what we recommend is that usually you count the number of plants in a thousandth of an acre. And I'm just putting this table here if you want to take a screenshot or taking a notes to know how, depending on the row spacing that you're usually used to use, how many feet you have of plants you have to measure in the 2 rows. So I hope you got your screenshot, and I'm going to keep moving with this. Something I like to mention is that when I go to the field, I don't go and count. I have this app, and you can use whichever app you want. I just download a counter. Basically, what it does is that you go to the first place of the field that you want to count. I don't even count. I just go touching my cell phone, and then I will go to the other one, and I keep just touching my cell phone, like even without like paying attention, but like it's not that hard. And I really like that in the bottom part, it tells me already the average. So I can go to the field, do my 5 counts that I do, and I already have the average, and I can multiply it by 1,000, and I know how many plants per acre I have. So I'm going to go through this really fast. Because it's related to things that happened this season, and it's a question that I got quite a bit last season, and that's why I'm going through these things today. When replanting is necessary, I'm going to be showing 2 different recommendations. One comes from Science for Success, that is a group of extensionists, soybean extensionists, that they're all across the US. So this is more like US based recommendation. So for them, if you have 70% less than 70% of the target population that you were aiming to, then you should consider to replant. If you have gaps that they're bigger than 1 square foot, you should consider to replant. If you have weight issues, you have to probably change this and be a little bit more strict with this. So probably it's not 70, probably it's even bigger. And then, of course, you have to keep an eye on the calendar date. Again, replanting, it should not be an emotional decision. It has to be an economical decision. And it's really costly. It adds seed cost, fuel, time, and it's something that I would say most of the time the answer is no, you should not replant. That's the truth. And something that you might consider also is repair planting, that is just selecting part of your field that you think it has some kind of issue, and just replant that part. You don't need to really go through the whole field. Saying that, now we are going to move to the North Dakota. Something that we mentioned is the calendar. So we know that every day after May 15, we are losing up to 0.8 bushels per acre. So basically, what we are saying here is that we are losing yield potential. So every day after May 15, we are losing yield. We don't see that we don't see. So that's something, when we are talking about the calendar, that's something that we should consider. So let's try to make some dates. Let's put some dates to that number. So according to data from NDSU, you can replant using the same maturity group up to June 20th. And you are going to have, even though you're losing that yield potential, you still are going to make the ends come, like the ends meet, sorry. Saying that, after June 20th and before July 1st, you might still replant, but something that you might consider and you should consider is changing that maturity group and making it a little bit earlier. After July 1st, the recommendation is do not replant. There's not enough time for that plant to actually yield enough to make a economical decision. And then we were talking about thresholds before. So when we were talking about soybeans, the US recommendation is 70%, but when we're here in North Dakota, actually we say that that's a little bit lower. So if you have 50%, so if you have half of the plants that you were expecting, then you should start considering to replant. That could be 50% or a minimum stand of 75,000 plants per acre. Now we are going to move to the real topic of this. This was up to now. I was just some things I really wanted to mention to you guys because it's realities that they're happening in that and happened last year. So when we are talking about plant population, we say that it's a really, really important decision that we are making because seed actually represents 35% of the cost of producing soybeans. It's huge. And this is information from the NDSU soybean budgets. We do have from NDSU some recommendations. These recommendations vary depending if you are in the eastern part of the state compared to the west part of the state. And I might say I might agree or disagree a little bit with this. In the eastern part of the state, having narrow rows, and we are talking narrow, it's from 12 to 14 inches. Having these narrow rows will make a difference in terms of yield potential. So you might achieve higher yields when you are using narrow rows. And when we are talking about which is that sweet spot where you get the most yield in the eastern part of the state, we are saying that is 170,000 plants per acre. I know that this is the Western Soybean School, so I'm not going to stop a little bit. I'm not going to stop much on this. I'm just going to say, keep this in mind. And now we move to the NDSU recommendation from the western side of North Dakota. And here is where I don't agree that much. So if you see the blue line, that's the narrow rows, and it shows that you might have a yield advantage when you are using narrow rows from 7 to 10. And the planting rate, that it's the good point to maximize your yields, and that this is the key point to maximize your yields, is 150,000 plants per acre. And this information is all published in the publication that's A1961. You can feel free to Google and read the whole publication and not just this screenshot that I put. And this is I use exactly the same information that it was published there. Now, the only thing is that I am revamp it a little bit and change a little bit the analysis. So I'm focusing in an analysis that it's not only showing the results per se, but I want to quantify the risk of making that decision. I think when we are providing information to you guys, it's really, really important that we highlight that our estimates or suggestions actually have some uncertainty there, and it's important that we quantify that. Our objective should be finding that optimum plant density that optimizes grain yield, but at the lowest risk. Sometimes we might not do that as well. So this is exactly the same information. It's divided in narrow and wide rows, and it was done with information from Carrington, Fargo, Hettinger, Minot, and Wilston. I'm going to focus now in each one of these, but highlighting the sites that they are in the western side of the state. Say what we can see here, it's Minot. I'm going to say that I don't trust these points here that has 60 bushes, even though all the repetitions here, you can see that they are there. It's something that I should evaluate. I'm showing all the information and I'm not trying to not put any bias. So for this presentation, I'm just going to ignore these points. When we go here, we can see that 60,000 plants per acre clearly is not what maximizes your yields. It's a little bit lower. And when we move to between 90 and 120 and 150, what we can see is that this shadow area actually, this like is the thinner that you can see. So that's the uncertainty I was talking about. So what we can see here is that this line is pretty much a straight line. And that basically means that 150, it's actually maximizing our yields, which is in agreement with what we are saying. Something I do not agree regarding the previous information is that difference between narrow and wide roads. What you can see here is that these two lines are basically overlapping. We did not see any difference on narrow and wide roads here in this showing this information. Saying that, you still have to make a decision. And I like to say that wide or narrow should be more decided towards which is your field history. So if you have weeds problems, please go narrow, try to cover that interval as soon as possible, just to try to compete with the weeds. Just try to cover them as soon as possible. If you have wide mold history and you know that it's challenging in that field, okay, you might need to go a little bit wider. And then just having more air going through those, through that canopy, just to try to make that environment not that favorable for wide mold. So that's my 2 cents on narrow versus road. Then we move to Williston. And Williston, we don't have higher yields. We don't have higher yields in good yields in Williston. You can see that everything goes around 20 bushes, and we might not have that peak. So if you put 160,000 plants per acre, or if you put 80, it's exactly the same. We did not see any difference. Something that we see here is that risk that I was mentioning before, if you have less than 80,000 plants per acre, you have more variability here. So 80,000 plants per acre in Williston, it sounds like a good decision. And now we move to Hettinger. Hettinger, we see more or less the same situation that we were seeing in Williston, but with an average that's much more higher. Again, something that's noticeable here is that in Hettinger, this green line that is narrow rows, we're always above the yellow that's a wide row. So you might see some differences in yield when you use narrow rows in Hettinger. So that's what this information shows. So in Hettinger, we tested populations from 75,000 plants per acre to 150,000 plants per acre. And you see that there is really a small slope here, increases really slowly. So my recommendation here, you should be aiming around 100,000 plants per acre in Hettinger, according to this information. And this was all going through recommendations in Western sites. I'm talking about plant populations exactly and deciding narrow or wide rows. And now I'm going to make just a brief comment before I finish, talking a little bit about how we decide plant population. What I always say is that I don't want you to have the highest yield. That's not my objective. My objective is that you have the highest profit. And this is just an example that brings information from Carrington, actually. And it's what I have been showing to you right now is like you have different seeding rates in the x-axis and different yields in the y-axis. And usually it's like that. It's like you put more plants and you keep increasing until a point that you don't increase yields anymore. And every time that you put more plants, that increase is smaller and smaller. So if you move from 70 to 120 plants, 1,000 plants per acre, you have a huge increase. But if you move from 120 to 170, that increase is a little bit lower. That's the whole thing. So how can we see this information in a different way? And it's basically creating economic scenarios. So here we have two different economic scenarios. We have a low price well, for me it's left, and a higher price in the right. So in each one of these economic scenarios, we have three lines that is basically how much is the cost of the seeds. It can go from green, that's low price, to blue, that's a higher price. So from 33 to almost $60 per unit of 140,000 plant seeds. Sorry. I'm not going to explain all these lines. I think it's too much. So I'm going to just highlight two situations. So the situation that we have a low market price, $8 per bushel, and we use the seed that costs the most. And you can see that, and again, like this is the same information I was showing before, that you have more yield and you have more seeds and you have more yield. But when we transform that and we just think in profit, it's completely opposite. So even though you have more yield, what you are doing is losing money because of the cost of the seed. So you can see that this line is going down since the beginning. So in this situation, the lowest plant population that we planted, it was the one that had the highest profit. If we move to the other situation, the one in the right, that the market price is $10 per bushel, and we use a seed that was the one with the lowest cost, you can see that now, yes, it actually follows the same trend as yield. So it really depends on the market situation, which plant population is the one that's best for me in terms of profit. So knowing that, and knowing that the market seems a little bit challenging or at least uncertain in terms of soybeans, I would recommend try to go lower when we are talking about seeding rates. You can cut a little bit, and it's still, even if you in the end you didn't get the maximum yield, probably that's going to be helping your profits. That's exactly what I care about for you guys. I'm working on creating this calculator. I've been working on this since last year. I did not have enough time to finish it yet, unfortunately. But basically, this is using exactly the same information that we showed before. And it basically gives you the alternative of putting a seed cost and a market price. And it gives you, it looks like I don't know how to use PowerPoint. And it gives you, here in this yellow box, it gives you an economical optimum. That is, again, it's different to that agronomical optimum that helps you optimizing your yield. Saying that, this is my take-home message. Is basically soybeans are great, are such a flexible crop. Even though if you have problems in emergence, they will cover that, but that actually is up to a point. When you are making all these decisions regarding replanting or plant populations, always try to take the emotions out of it and try to focus on the economics behind this. Saying that, thank you so much for your time. I would love if you have any questions. I always like to share these resources that I think are great, like Science for Success is this group of US extensionists that share a lot of good information. We do trials all across the US testing the same things just to try to figure out how to help our soybean farmers. Thanks to the North Dakota Soybean Council, we from NDSU Extension, we can provide this in the pod podcast that is 5 minutes every week that we bring specialists to say something about what's happening on the soybean world. Last week, we had Ron Hogan talking about the NDSU budgets and how soybeans stand in this market situation. And this week, and I'm really looking forward for this week, we are going to have Joe Ikley talking about the new dicamba label and how that it will fit in our productive systems. Also, thanks also for the North Dakota Soybean Council. We also do a webinar every year that's getting it right. And that QR code will take you to the recordings of that. And saying that, there is a lot of good information there. We have, again, Joe Ikley talking 20 minutes of how you should control kochia in your field. So I think that's really valuable. We have Jenna Canolo talking about aphids, and we do have a way talking about the problems that we had last year regarding Y mold, seed treatments, and all those kind of recommendations. So if you want more information regarding soybeans, that's a good place to start. So saying that, I will stop sharing. Thank you so much for your time.